Okay, everybody, welcome back to Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery. I'm your host, Fred Carroll, along with my co-host, life coach and author of The Opioid Epidemic, now available on Amazon, Scott H. Silverman. How are you, Scott?
I'm good, Fred. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. So everybody out there, if you want to, we don't have phones again, still having a phone issue. I'm trying to settle it and figure it out or drop it all together. I don't know what to do, Scott. They're not any for the of how easy it was for me to get. It's not as easy for me to find somebody to help me fix on their end. It's on something on their end is going wrong, and they keep sending me those robo emails, and I can't figure it out. But hold on, I'm gonna shut my you talk because I'm gonna shut my ceiling fan off.
Okay. So, it's interesting you talk about an issue. After 3 weeks, I wonder if that issue is now a problem. It's funny, when it comes to words, but I know it's been frustrating for Fred. Plus, we want people to chime in, but they can always instant message, can't they?
Yeah, definitely. Go into the chat box wherever you're watching this now, and send us anything. It could be as simple as hello. Send us something you'd like us to talk about on the show. Send us I don't care how long it is. Send me a story about you and your issues, or a solution you had to one of your issues, or a friend of yours. Anything. We're willing to talk about just about everything.
Well, let's talk about this, because you mentioned this before we started. You actually got some emails.
Yeah, I did. You want me to go over them right now?
Well, we got rid of the issue. We're now calling it a problem. And we'll know if our one fan is still out there, Chris, if he chimes in. But I think, what a great way to start the show. I mean, I don't know what their content is, but if they're negative, then let's move on to the next part of the show.
No, but actually there is a borderline negative one, but I enjoy reading the negative ones.
I think
because
look, someone took time to write down, to find the email and send information. Then I'll tell you about what I got today on Instagram, which was interesting. But go ahead. You want to read them? I think we should.
So first of all, if you want to send an email, you could send it to vsz_publishing@outlook.com. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll actually pop it up on the screen when I get a chance. But the first one says, "Dear Fred and Scott, on a recent episode, one of you mentioned feeling inferior to others, and I felt that. I always assumed it was only me, but now I know others feel this too. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think I'm alone in any feelings, but in my head, at that moment, I was not connected to a place where I could admit it. So thanks for all you do, Michelle." So that's going back to when I mentioned about feeling inferior, which I don't.
That wasn't my Michelle, was it?
Well, it might be. I don't know.
And by the way, when you're saying that, they said, I'm not sure which one of you. I remember which one of us spoke up, but it doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't impact both of us.
Right. So. Well, I think it is a very common, and I understood what they were saying.
Me too.
We forget that other people have the same issues going on, and it's a very common problem, and there's no shame in it. Obviously, if I'm saying it, I'm not ashamed of it. That's how I felt. I felt inferior, and part of our show is talking about how we feel about certain situations. So if the hosts aren't telling the truth, how could we expect our guests or our listeners to tell us the truth? So the second one. First off, I am an active addict. I hide it well and manage somehow to be financially and emotionally well. I am now in my early 50s and use cocaine daily. I feel I have it mostly under control, but lately I have experienced a few medical issues where my cocaine use has been revealed. So what should be my next step? And do I tell my family, or do I do this on my own? Thanks in advance, Anonymous. What do you think, Scott?
Couple interesting. First of all, in his 50s, or in their 50s, what was the other word they used? Mostly. But recently they're seeing different, symptoms. So my sense would be, if you took the time to communicate with us, first of all, bravo. I applaud that. Second of all, if you're able to say it out loud to somebody else, again, bravo. And thirdly, if you're doing the first two things, the odds are you probably should check in with a professional. And I mean, a clinical person, a therapist, someone, who really is in this field, who deals with people who suffer from self-medication. Do you have an addiction problem? You know what? Yet to be revealed. My sense would be, if you've been doing it a while and you haven't been able to stop, the signs are. And actually, you can go Google online, what are the symptoms of addiction? And actually, Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe, even has a 21-question quiz. And you can go online and do your own private quiz. But I would stay on top of seeking understanding and getting informed, because if you're asking the question, the odds are it may be a way out of control. And the older you get, the more your body gets impacted by substances. And substances today are cut with many other things, number one. Number two, substances today are much more pure than they used to be, and they're also less expensive. We're finding that with methamphetamine, we're finding that with fentanyl, and all counterfeit medications. It's so cheap. Cocaine still kind of holds its value because it takes a lot to get it here, but you don't know what someone's doing with it if they're cutting it and what's in it. And God forbid you end up with some fentanyl in it and it kills you. So get on it, get informed, get some information, and let us know how it goes. We'd like to be able to track that with you. And if you'd like to come on and talk about it, let's talk about it, because I would be willing to bet there are thousands of people out there that are wondering the same thing. Do I really have a problem? How do I find out if I do? How do I take my pulse? What's the quiz for? So let us know.
Yeah. And I'll read one more. And this is the one that's negative, but I'll explain why I'm reading it, because it's got a reason. So, wow, Fred, you feel inferior to others. Welcome to the real world. We all do. This is not a revelation. Maybe if you stop trying to save the world with your garbage opinions, maybe then we all will feel better. You giving advice to addicts is actually causing more addicts. You are not a talent. So the reason I go in, he didn't leave his name, which I'm not surprised, or her name. But the reason I go into this is they're getting everything completely backwards here, because first of all, this isn't based on nothing me and you do has anything to do with talent. This isn't a talent show. This is two guys discussing a very serious topic and groups of other topics, trying to do better for the world, to help people out there that don't know where to seek the help. And we're going to talk about that, about your book.
We're an information sharing platform to give people a place to come and talk. I mean, I'm not even an expert. I'm a subject matter expert, but I'm not a clinician. I'm not, and I say that all the time. Fred says it all the time. So my sense is, Fred, it sounds like you pushed a button for somebody who doesn't want to hear that what they're doing may not be working. And I don't ever remember you judging anybody. So again, bravo. I'd rather have someone call and yell at me. And I'm looking for this thing I got today because it was kind of brutal. It came through a third party on Instagram.
Chris says the person who wrote that is having a bad day and maybe he needs a big hug. But honestly, I do send those because I don't mind negative opinions, and I don't listen if they're trying to be funny, who knows, and stuff. When they attack like that, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't change. Me and you are still coming back next week and doing this show because the juice is worth the squeeze, is what I like to say. The juice is worth the squeeze. Whether or not we can't please everyone, we're not going to please everyone, but this is not talent based. This has nothing to do with me or you. This is just our time that we're putting in to try to help people out there that are seeking help and information. So that's my theory on it. And there is one more. I read Scott's new book and would like to thank him for the work he does. I found many of his chapters alarming, but informative. Thanks, Scott. So that was what you got. That's a good one.
Who's that from?
It doesn't say. Listen, all I do is get these in through anonymous. I mean, I could search their emails and stuff like that, but tend not to because I tell them they could write in anonymously. So,
Well, that was nice, though.
Did you find the thing you were looking for yet?
I'm not that good on Instagram yet, but I can paraphrase it. Basically, I talked about, and they only listened to, it was a podcast with these great ladies here. It's called She's a 10 times 5 podcast, which was confusing to me when I saw them on LinkedIn. But what it is they're 50-year-olds, and they've created this platform, this forum, and they do interviews. And I was the second male. They normally are focused on bringing in, I'm going to use my words, female talent. So I irritated them enough somehow, somewhere, and they, I kind of asked if I could be on the show, and they said yes. So I went up and recorded with them. They're here in San Diego.
Well, good.
Anyway, so basically what the person said was, by using, they were inferring that by saying heroin and saying fentanyl, somehow I was stigmatizing the person who uses them as a drug addict. And I believe, and they said, the word opioid. And I cleared up the fact that opioid is the name of the medication. Heroin is an opioid, and fentanyl is an opioid. And there are many other opioids and mixtures of opioids. So I explained that I use those terms, because they're important so people understand them versus a benzo, and also a methamphetamine, which is a stimulant, and then drug cocktails. I use a certain language that I think helps clear up some of the stigma and some of the misunderstanding. And hopefully they got it. And I also said that there are people who take these medications who need these medications. I mean, medication-assisted treatment, which is a form of harm reduction used in substance use disorders, is something that Confidential Recovery, we honor every day, because some people need medication to get off of medication. But when it comes to someone who has an issue with pain, especially like with fentanyl or with OxyContin that's in the hospital, it's a prescribed dose, that's completely okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's teed up. What I'm concerned about is the counterfeit medication. And I'm also concerned that, it gets glorified by, sports figures and the entertainment industry. And people use those mechanisms as a reason to try something that could kill them. And all I try to talk about is, and it's in the book, make an informed decision. Do not sit at a party with people you don't know and take something out of a bowl that looks like it could be Xanax, but it might be Xanax cut with fentanyl, and it could be heroin cut with fentanyl. That's all I'm talking about. Even medical marijuana, Fred, I support if it's needed and called for and it's supervised and it's in an informed way, because those are great tools. And right now, if they pulled OxyContin off the market and stopped prescribing it, according to what I understand from the AMA and the Pharmaceutical Association, there's no replacement drug right now. And because Oxy has been prescribed for so long, a lot of people who take it under doctor's care who are addicted to it now, there's no way that they're going to be able to stop on their own. And there is no replacement medical therapy yet for OxyContin or pain short-term from a medical perspective, medicine perspective. So we have a long way to go. And there are experts who think that putting marijuana in place of opioids is going to deal with the pain. And the experts say that is not true. Just the wannabes are saying that. So we have a difficult river we're going to have to row up the next couple of years as we shift from OxyContin to replacement medication for people dealing with pain.
Right. Yeah. I actually have a video. I'm going to show it, the video I have on fentanyl, and let's see. It's a short video. It's only 3 minutes long. Let's see if this works like I intend it to, Scott.
Okay.
We're going to see. But let's find out.
In 2020, Americans faced two deadly epidemics, COVID-19 and a record number of drug overdose deaths, a 30% surge over 2019. Drugs are now deadlier in the US than cars and guns combined, and in San Francisco last year, overdoses killed more people than COVID-19. This rise
we're not getting sound. There I am. There you are.
Okay, so, you must have muted me. I couldn't hear that towards the end.
Yeah, they're saying no. Now they're saying they can't hear it. So we're gonna have to figure that sharing video part out. But I think they get the idea. And me and you watched the video prior to it for the most part, and it's stuff we've talked about before. It did work.
Way, I found that thing. If you want me to read it.
Yeah, I just want to tell the people it did work. Before we went on the air, we tested it, and it did work. Now it's not working. So this is more reasons for people to write in negative letters to me.
Yeah,
because it's all on me.
That's like the person that goes into the mechanic and says, "There's a noise coming somewhere behind the driver."
Yeah,
turns out it was the neighbor with the blower clearing off the leaves. So you want me let me read this to you. This is what they say. There is no opioid epidemic. There is an illegal fentanyl and heroin epidemic. It's this kind of misinformation, fear mongering that causes massive increases in suicide, plus death by heart attack and stroke in the chronic pain community. People with advanced cancer, Crohn's disease, and other highly painful and curable illnesses are being forced off the only thing they have to survive due to this. I have Crohn's and fibromyalgia. I'm lucky in that I can afford alternatives. Most cannot. It's a shame to see things like this due to unplaced fear and paranoia. People like me don't abuse opioids. Yet you've lumped me in with drug abusers and addicts without blinking an eye. Okay. And I think I kind of spoke to most of this, but there is an opioid epidemic. I'm going to argue all day long about that. And the reason I say that is because everything that this person says, fentanyl and heroin, are opioids. So if you don't say it for what it is, then you're making some sort of political statement, and I'm not. And I understand what they're saying, that if and doctors have slowed down prescribing, thank God, over the last couple of years, because the DEA and the AMA have said, and the Surgeon General, that long-term consumption of OxyContin does not deal with pain effectively. This person even says they have the resources to get alternatives. Wonderful for them. So I just want to be clear. An opioid is an opioid. You can't call it some medication you take for pain if it's an opioid, because I'm trying to make sure it's clear to people, because an opioid that's in counterfeit medication that can kill somebody, if people aren't aware of the danger, they're going to completely bypass it. And, I've shared many times overdoses are over 240 a day, which is a plane crash in our country. And I've since learned, since I started saying that a year ago, overdoses are north of 500 or 600 every day. But because of Narcan, because of naloxone, which is in Narcan is the spray you can give somebody, which reverses an overdose. So here's something interesting. I have Crohn's. Pills made mine worse, not better. Fixing the problem, getting healthy, did way more for me personally. So, and I think that's a true statement, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. And that's what all the science shows. I mean, clearly, if you've got back problems or heart problems or leg problems or hip problems, and I'm not a doctor, and you can't move without some sort of medication, I feel bad for you, because that's a sad place to be, because science says long-term use doesn't deal with the pain. But also, I just want to be clear on this point, that I'm trying to educate people so we don't have more people overdose and die. And I don't want this person to feel that way, but I understand it, because they probably know somebody who's in pain clinics. They see them, and they used to get a 90-day supply. Now they've got to go every 2 weeks if the doctor's still prescribing, and they have to test in a cup to make sure there's nothing else in their system. And if there is, the doctor can't keep prescribing OxyContin. So it's put some real restrictions on, but the restrictions needed to be put on. Doctors were just writing pills like they were giving away free M&Ms.
Well, it does look like today I'm going to show this now. The drug distributor Johnson & Johnson reached $26 billion deal to resolve the opioid lawsuit. Now, I have the article in front of me here somewhere, and there are a few things in it. First of all, this is between the 3 biggest opioid distributors and drug maker. So this is 4 different companies reaching a $26 billion settlement to resolve thousands of lawsuits over opioid epidemic. A crisis that has killed more than 500,000 Americans over the past 20 years. So This is for major drug distributors McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, and along with pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson. And it should potentially release the companies from current and future litigation if a critical mass of communities across the country agree to drop their cases due to it. So it does have all kinds of things, and this is just today. New
Hey,
York,
Fred, was the Purdue company in there? I didn't hear Purdue.
No, they don't mention Purdue.
Oh, no, that's probably a separate lawsuit because I know they're in somewhere. I heard 21 billion for Purdue alone. Well, these are distributors, and Purdue was the manufacturer, meaning they made the pills, and then they gave them to, or these groups were the storefronts that distribute them through the reps and through the doctors and to the pharmacies and other places. So the chain of distribution they were a big part of, but they were not the manufacturer because Purdue had a patent on it.
Yeah, and of course, the private lawyers are going to recoup $2 million themselves. But this has a lot of, like New York is going to get $1.25 billion as part of the nationwide settlement. Pennsylvania agreed to it. A message that it just says states are not going to tolerate this any longer. They're going to have to get into litigation and figure a way out of it, through hurting their pockets. Now, I don't know how much that hurts their pockets, when we're dealing with companies of this size. But I guess it
doesn't make it, so what if they lose 2 years of profit? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think Purdue had a settlement years ago, where the DEA had created a major investigation, and that, in some cases, I wish the Department of Justice would be held accountable as well, because they're the ones that monitored every single pill that was made. And the DOJ issues the licenses through the DEA to the script writers, meaning as a doctor, you can't write a prescription unless you have a license to write a prescription. And the DEA are the ones who oversee that licensure. So it's fascinating to me, and the thing that really scares me, Fred, about these kind of numbers is that the money, a lot of the money will potentially go to the criminal justice system because technically they're the biggest enforcer. And secondly, the states themselves, I don't know where it was. Was it, I'm going to get this wrong. One of the lower states, maybe one of the Dakotas, but they got a settlement and they took, it was like 360 million or something like that. This was like 2 years ago. And they claimed that they were going to earmark 243 million of it to build a new university to study this. Yeah. So I just hope, that everyone gets a piece of this. And then, of course, there's the families who lost loved ones. I mean, I know a few here in San Diego that are in the lawsuit. By the way, there was 2,300 trust action lawsuits that were in place about 3 years ago. So who knows if New York's only getting 1.2 billion, little cities in Texas or Nebraska or Wisconsin are going to get, maybe $500,000, which is still money they wouldn't have gotten. But you look at California, between San Francisco and Los Angeles and San Diego, we have 40 million people in this state. I don't know what the distribution will be here, but I know this state, if the state gets it and their job is to dole it out to the counties, and then the county's job is to dole it out to providers, they're just going to supplement the money they're already earmarking for the counties that are providing the existing,
well, I don't know. I don't know if people were able to hear when the part of the video, which I now figured out what I did wrong, but I'm not going to tell you. But
you didn't turn it on?
No, I'll tell you. I started the video, and because it's playing through my speakers, which goes through my microphone, we were getting a little background noise. So I muted you and me, which muted my microphone, which means the people couldn't hear the video coming through my microphone. That's why it muted suddenly. They all said they could hear it at the beginning, and then it muted. So this is user error. But and get used to it.
Talk to the engineer, because the engineer has got to support the user, unless you're the engineer.
I'm the engineer too. So,
Well,
I wanted to talk.
Sit yourself down after this show and have a nice heart to heart.
Since we have a few more minutes left and stuff, and through the last few weeks, we've been mentioning parts of your book and stuff. As I read through it, I pick out parts that I like. And today I chose to pick out chapter 12, which is I Need Help, which is something you preach all the time about how hard it is for people to ask for help. So first I want to read you give a definition of the word stigma in there. And that is the perception that a certain attribute makes a person unacceptable and different from others, leading to prejudice and discrimination against that person. So in this chapter, you go into details on how to ask for the reasons, what's going to happen. Like one, the stigma, if the stigma of this isn't reduced, your most likely outcomes are going to be harassment of the addict increases, harassment of family becomes more blatant, friends and neighbors start to withdraw, the fear of rejection and ridicule grows, and the fear of not being hired or not being able to retain a job increases. So when you started writing this, how do you know, first of all, in a book like this, did you have, without talking about the chapter itself, just the whole book, did you have all these chapters written out with your co-writer there, your ghostwriter, and did you then figure out, okay, I Need Help is the 12th chapter, or how do you know it was the 12th chapter and not the first chapter? What did you do for a system?
Well, I think, and that's a great question. And I think that was what was interesting. And this is why the book, it took 3 years. But I think what the goal is to get the subject matter down and then start talking to people much smarter than me, which is in the book, families who lost loved ones, our district attorney here in San Diego, somebody who works with the DEA, treatment providers, families who not necessarily didn't lose somebody, but had addiction in their family. The definition of stigma, I think we had a couple different ones, but went with the ones that, you can look up in a dictionary so nobody could really say, where did that come from? So that's where the base was for that. And then the idea was sequencing information in a way, some of it makes sense in the sequence it's in, some of them it may appear like it's not, but I think the whole, if you look at each chapter towards the end of it, there's kind of a quick summary of what next steps look like. And I think the idea of I Need Help at the end really was pushed by, the thought process of, let's make this the most strategic takeaway, that no matter how informed you are, if the person who's suffering doesn't understand that they're suffering, how do you help them? And that's really a part of what the book is about, is how to help that person who suffers, not by necessarily putting footprints in the sand for them, but that's part of the book. But more importantly, you as a family member, what can you do? A good example is I just spoke to someone today, and I went through my notes, and the last time we spoke as a family was April of 2020. And this individual in the last year has lost their significant other. The significant other took the children legitimately. They're now living in the house alone, and their problem has shifted from alcohol to methamphetamine, and they're doing both now, losing weight, losing consciousness, losing memory, and potentially, if there wasn't a family member that could help cover some of the overhead, they would more than likely lose the house, and they would end up in jail, an institution, or potentially dead. So the people I was talking to today were the family, and they said, everything you told us was going to happen, happened. What do we do now? I said, let's go back to our original plan and institute what it is we talked about. Because now they're talking about, well, we want to go to the court and we want to get control over her decision-making process, kind of like what happened with, Britney Spears. Well, that takes a long time, hard thing to prove. It's a very expensive endeavor. And ultimately, that could drive somebody in worse shape. This person still maintains a household somehow, but has lost her immediate significant other and the children. And this is a year and a half later, roughly. And I remember this was going on 2 or 3 years before the family reached out to me, and they'd had my number for 2 years before they called, because they were trying to do it themselves and had everything happen the way I'd asked them to do it. it might have been a different outcome. But you know what? Clearly, this individual's an adult. If they don't want to go into treatment, they don't have to. It's hard to make them. And if losing her significant other and losing her children wasn't motivation enough, and you know, the big issue today was, what about her mental health issues? Clearly, they've got them. Clearly, it's gotten worse, and clearly, the level of need now is greater than it's ever been. So it doesn't get better on its own, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. What you did mention, though, and I think it's important for people to understand, you mentioned they still own a home and they still have a job or whatever. I think that's important for people to understand, because it's part of the stigma. We think just because you're on drugs means you're quote unquote a loser or a bottom feeder or down in the dumps or homeless. It doesn't. You could have a job and still be a drug addict, an addict, a sex addict, a alcoholic, all these things. You could have a home and maintain it and stuff. So there's plenty of guys on Wall Street that do cocaine every day, you know, and they're very bright. It doesn't make you dumb, is my point. It's not a smart idea, but it doesn't mean you're not intelligent. Intelligence and non-intelligence has nothing to do with being an addict or drug. And I think that's important, because that's a stigma. You know, it's kind of a stigma, an opposite stigma almost. It's a stigma on the drug addict.
Well, you know, here's the thing. Addiction is not zip code specific. And to be totally transparent, the person living in the house, the house is not in their name now. So somehow they kind of worked it out years ago, thinking that would probably be smart. The problem is, you know, let's say, for example, this person's using enough medication and doesn't have any cash, and brings people into their home to distribute and use that as a distribution point. God forbid the house gets raided. Who's ever on title is going to lose the house. So there is no way to sit there and hope it's going to get better on its own. It never does. And to your point, Fred, there are high functioning addicts in the world and people who suffer from, you know, multiple disorders, and they still, you know, run a business or have a business, or they're part of an infrastructure. So it's like diabetes. You don't have to be poor or Jewish or tall or fat or skinny, you know, or not speak any specific language. It's a disease. It doesn't discriminate, and you never know who's going to get it. So that's why the book, you know, I think is important. And it's not just for, you know, it's called The Opioid Epidemic, obviously, but it's for people who suffer from any substance use disorder, anyone who's got some behavioral health issues, because most people who anesthetize themselves every day, over time, if they haven't already got them, they acquire or develop, or it gets amplified, mental health issues. Because if you're anesthetizing yourself every day, there is some reason for it. And it isn't just because you want to stay up or go to sleep. It's because you don't want to feel. And the disease of addiction, one of the outcomes is the inability to feel feelings. So it's one of those kind of things that you can't fix this on your own.
Yeah,
and, you know,
definitely.
Ron White, you know, the the comedian, says you can't fix stupid. And I love when he talks about that. But he's referring to something else.
Right.
I think one of his ex-wives. I'm not sure.
Did you happen to see that? Let me post this up. That the first trans lifeline has been released. It came out this week, I believe.
No, I'm taking a picture of it. That's great, man.
So it's the first U.S. transgender suicide hotline, and it's 1-877-565-8860. And I'm guessing, listen, things aren't created like this because it costs a lot of money to create these campaigns and to get these numbers if they're not needed. So obviously there's a need for this somewhere. And just so everybody knows, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-TALK. And you can call those 24/7. You don't even have to be necessarily on the edge itself. If you're just having feelings about this, if you're having thoughts, the people there are trained and they're there to help you. They're not there to call the police on you, and they're not going to send them to your house unless it's, I believe, if they have reason to believe your life is truly in jeopardy at that moment, like you already did something or something. But it truly is there to help, and they will help guide you to a path that we can't. Me and you do not have the training to deal with that. So I thought that was important. That's always something good. So
and I'd be willing to bet, Fred, that that if you have a family member who you think might be in that place or has talked about being in that place, you can call and get some information on what you can do as someone who's close to that person to help guide them or get them on the phone. So don't expect the person who's talking about it to maybe stop in the middle of their action and go, maybe I'll make a phone call. Make the phone call for them. Get informed.
Yeah, and you could Google any question you want. And quite honestly, I get most of my information from doing research during the week on our show. So just so people know, there's a thing, I don't even know if you're aware of this. There's a website called flipboard.com. So flipboard.com is articles from all the magazines and digital magazines across the world. And you get to put in what interests you. So one of my categories is addiction. So anytime an article is written on addiction, it gets sent to me and I monitor whether it's from a legit source. I tend to choose more like the Washington Post articles and stuff like that, more from professional journalism rather than Star Magazine, or anything like that. But if I could do it, you could do it. That's my point is I don't have any training in this. All I have is the desire to help people and hope they could straighten their lives out from a difficult situation. And that's all I could bring to the show.
Well, but you found me and you put this together. I would say that's a skill set that adds value as well, Fred, because how many people are doing this? I mean, there's a lot of people doing podcasts. There's a lot of people talking about a lot of wonderful things. There's a lot of great talent out there that wants to help others, but helping people navigate, it's hard. I mean, if you don't know how, it's hard unless someone's helping either hold your hand or showing you how or opening doors or, just flip forward. You just shared that with me. I wrote it down. I'm going to look into it. Or Flipboard. Jesus, my hearing is so bad. So, I think it's important. And that's what we're trying to do. So let us know. Is there something that we're missing? Something we should add? Send those letters. Put that email up again, Fred. I'd love to get people. I'd love to bust our chops. Tell me that I need to lose more weight. Well, don't tell me I need to lose more weight. I hear that from family every day. And I got to go to this wedding in September. And I'm sweating it because I've got to lose 2 inches in my waist.
Is it a wedding? It's not a wedding you're paying for.
No, if that were the case, I'd be losing weight every day just thinking about it. No, it's a nephew. A nephew is getting, and we're going, to a nice place to do it, and we're all driving up there, and my youngest is putting pressure on all of us, and we talked about it briefly today. Thinking about losing weight, I always gain weight, so I've got to relax and breathe, and I may have to go see a therapist to hypnotize me so I can lose more weight or start eating that seaweed stuff that you eat, Fred.
Yeah, I love that seaweed. So speaking of losing weight and stuff, I start my new job next week.
Congratulations.
Which is going to put I'm assuming I'm going to be doing about 20,000 steps a night because it's a big place I'm working at. And being in management, it's a little, a lot of work. I'm sure I'm going to have to.
Maybe we'll set up a challenge. I'll find a way. I'll take 10% of whatever you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, but so it is going to change probably how we do our show. I'm unsure if I'm going to be able to keep it at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, 4 o'clock.
It's not how
Pacific.
we do it. It's just when we do it.
Right.
Okay.
We're still going to do it. Because I still have 3 days off a week. It's just going to be the time because I am working 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. are my hours. So it's good for me and my family. I'll tell you that much. And it is probably it's going to work because if people don't know, Scott is on the West Coast. So he's 3 hours behind me anyway. If I was doing it at midnight, my time, it's only 9 o'clock his time. That's not a unheard of time. And when we're dealing with addicts and stuff, quite honestly, this is a 24/7 problem. This has nothing to do with 7 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, mostly the shift you're working.
Right.
For guys like me that used to be on stimulants, for us, 8 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning was our second daytime shift.
Right. Yeah, just to do what you got to do. But
well, yeah, because once you take that, you can't go to sleep. Well, that was then. But anyway, congratulations on the job. How long have you been on this hunt?
Since I have been, well, I left my last job in 2019, but I left it under circumstances where I thought I was going to go into business for myself.
Right.
So I had saved for a long time to prep for this. So I was prepared financially to take a run at doing marketing or video production and all that stuff. But then COVID hit 2 months after I did this. So bad timing, but it didn't help me with my business structuring. And then I couldn't, quite honestly, I couldn't find a job. I could not. And I used to shine at this. And that was part of my inferior feelings, where I'm sending out to stuff that I'm well experienced for and trained for. And we're not talking rocket scientists here. We're talking general labor type jobs and stuff like that. And I just wasn't getting the call. Now, I don't know if that has to do with my age, which I know that's still a problem. And I don't blame some of these, like, let's say construction. For the cost of me, they could potentially hire two 21-year-olds who are much stronger, more energy, more time, but less experience. Now, do you trust them and stuff? So it's a give and take. And luckily I found this. I honestly, all I could tell people is, if you're looking for a work, don't quit. Don't give up trying, because I almost did with this specific job, because I went in for an interview on a Tuesday for this job, and the guy that was supposed to interview me forgot about the interview and wasn't there. And this is a major company. And I was like, what am I dealing with here? The person didn't even show up for the interview. And they said, can he come back Friday? Tell him I'm sorry and all that. Well, when Friday came, I said, do I want to put my suit on again just to go down here? This was a $15 an hour job, which is livable money, but in Connecticut, that's not a lot of money. And I was debating, do I go? Do I not go? And boy, am I glad I went, because it turned into a much bigger job than that. And probably the best job I've ever had in my life overall. So don't give up is just give it a chance.
Well, we'll be talking more about that next week. You know, you got to get a haircut and start wearing deodorant, and every day's got to be shower day, brother.
Well, it's a night shift.
It doesn't matter. You'll be around other people, for God's sakes. And by the way, you know, it's interesting. One of the things we used to teach for years in my old nonprofit was, if you're not working, your job is to look for a job. So, you know, to your point, and, you know, and you almost gave up, and by showing up, because what happened with the circumstances, you ended up getting an outcome that you probably never considered. So to sit here and say, you know, you're one of the best jobs you've ever been offered, and you haven't started it yet. And imagine 6-9 months, a year from now, which is not a long time, especially if you think you're getting older. Because there's a guy that I know, we used to go to lunch together. He goes, you know, I'm so old now, it feels like I'm having lunch every 15 minutes. So there's an opportunity here to really, you know, and I want to talk more about it, Fred, because I think there are people who did exactly like you did. You know, there was, the economy was ramping up, things were going strong. They pulled the trigger and COVID hit. And let me tell you something, the numbers are staggering. Tens of millions of people were impacted by this. And some, you know, are not going to recover easily. It'll take a lot more time. And now with this new Delta variant, God knows, I'm putting my mask back on. I'm hunkering back down at the house. I got a couple things I have to go out and do now, and I'm going to, but I'm going to wear a mask personally. I just don't want to run the risk. And I've been vaccinated. I mean, I know a lot of people got vaccinated, and they're catching this new variant. So it's a little scary, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's all a good thing. But I do want to, another thing I think is, I see it a lot on social media, and I try not to react to it. It's very political based and stuff like that. I try not to react to those because that's what they kind of want. But I see a lot of employed people now stigmatizing unemployed people. I'll use the word stigma, and calling them lazy just because they're getting that extra 300 or whatever it is on their unemployment and stuff. They're lazy because they won't just take it. There's jobs everywhere. I just went through it. I'm here to tell you, it's not as easy as you think. There's not as many jobs hiring as they're advertising. And I'm being honest. I never stopped looking for work. But personally, for me, I'd have to be a fool to give up. And I wasn't getting unemployment, but I would think in my situation, you'd have to be a fool to give up whatever it is, $800 to make 400. This does not sound like smart, science or math. It doesn't sound like it's going to pay the bills. I think it's time for these employers to start appreciating the workers and paying them a fair wage. People need to survive. People are going to work and still homeless. That makes no sense in America. So stop picking on the people and help them. It does not help. That's my point is it does not help that unemployed person. And believe me, it's not your money. They're not taking it from you personally. You're paying the taxes whether they go to work or don't go to work. You're paying the same amount of tax. Don't let it bog you down. Be happy you have a job and health benefits and all those things, and just help these people by probably not commenting on Facebook negatively. Why don't they type good luck? I hope if you're unemployed, you find a job today. That kind of gets the message across too. And it's a little more hopeful. So, well, that's going to be it, Scott. Anything you want to talk about?
No, I think it's fair to say, though, Fred can get a job. What's that saying? Anyone can, right?
That's right. Anybody can. And I write books. Anybody could write a book. Trust me. Sit down and put the time in. It's all time. Same thing with the job. If I gave up looking, I wouldn't have found this. So yes. I just kept plugging along and thought karma would pay me back. There was a few jobs I thought I had that I got let go of at the last minute, out of the running for. That's defeating. That'll deflate you when, and knock you down a peg. But I kept
Fred,
plugging.
But karma, it did pay you back, but in a good way, right? Good karma.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's awesome. But let me give out my phone number again. So I want people to know, if you can't reach Fred, because now he's working, soon, a couple of weeks from now, I'll be tough to get through to him. He'll have to go through his assistant. But you call me or text me at 619-993-2738 and go get a copy of the book. Okay, for God's sakes.
What is that?
619-993-2738. And it's called The Opioid Epidemic. Don't try to spell it. Get on Amazon, go into your bookstore and ask for it. If they don't get it, they'll call the fulfillment company and they'll get some copies. So call me or text me 993-2738, area code 619, or Google me, Scott H. Silverman, and let's have a conversation and let's start talking. And if you don't want to call me and you think your community needs some support, get the information to your local sheriff, to your mayor, to your city council, to your board of supervisors. I was just on a big call today with Attorney General in Florida. I won't tell you what area, and they are so friggin' organized. I'm gonna, Palm Beach. I'm gonna tell you, they have a group that's working on the shift and the changes and the pivoting of helping people. I've never seen anything like it, and I was invited to sit on it. And I had my feelings hurt because they never introduced me. But that's okay. I'm thinking about it today, but realized how well organized they are, which goes to show when there's a need and you work together, you can save lives. And these people are putting people in jail, which is great, that are killing people. And those who want help are getting access to help. To me, that's such an apolitical environment. And that's the kind of thing our leaders should be doing, is this kind of work where people work together to help one another. I'm going to share one more thing, Fred, before you go. Yeah. Watching on the news today, they're setting up this new committee. I'm going to speak it, paraphrase it wrong. And one group got picked, and then the other group offered up some picks, and those picks were denied because of other reasons, and now they're fighting. I would encourage the leaders of our government, stop fighting, for God's sakes. You look and act like little kids on the media, and you point the finger at each other. And ultimately, if you were to get going and try to solve the problems, you wouldn't have the time to fight and argue, and more than likely, you'd find common themes to work on. It is insane to watch the news today. And, and I pushed a point that I wanted to make, and everyone, they told me they're not going to talk about your book because they're going to talk about COVID, Biden, and Trump.
Yep.
And And I felt bad. I thought, well, God, this is important too, but I'm not giving up. You know me, Fred. I'm not giving
Yeah,
up.
you got to keep
That's
plugging.
my rant. That's my rant today.
That's good. It's nice to hear a Scott rant. Okay, everybody. So that's the end of Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery. We're usually here at 7 p.m. Eastern time and 4 p.m. Western. What is it called? What's it called out there? Pacific time?
The
Sandy?
other time.
The other time?
Yeah.
And, I will make sure I put out, if we're going to change times next week, I will make sure on Monday I have that posted. You could go to Ending the Stigma group page on Facebook. We have a YouTube page. And also if you're interested in reading a free magazine, if you go to venomstudios.com, you could subscribe to my monthly magazine called Apostrophes, and you'll get it free. And it's written for podcasters and indie authors, but it's for readers, writers, podcasters, and listeners, basically. So that's everybody in the world. So it's doing very well. By the way,
when you have the update of when you're shifting, if we're shifting, I'll let Chris know personally, because I know he'll enjoy that.
Yeah, we got to tell Chris, because
thanks for coming in, Chris. We appreciate it, brother.
Chris says Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah,
okay,
he knows that, Chris. He just, for some reason, is in denial that any other time zone exists.
That's right. There's a West Coast and a Best Coast.
There you go. All right, we hear that.
Okay, everybody, you want to say your closing line?
If nobody has said they love you today, Fred loves you today.
I love you today. Okay, everybody, have a great night.
Take care, man.
Talk to you soon. Be good.
All right. I'm going to bounce off as well, Fred.